Major funding for these broadcasts is made possible by grants from New York Community Bank, Capital One Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Chase Commercial Term Lending, M&T Bank, Customers Bank, Genova Burns, Witkoff, Greenberg Traurig. Additional support is provided by AKA Hotels, Corman Communities, Ariel Property Advisors, AVR Realty Company, Bank of America Merrill Lynch, Bank Leumi USA, Briarwood Organization, CBRE, Citizens Bank, Collins Building Services, CPEX Real Estate Services, Cushman & Wakefield, DDG, Dime Savings Bank of Williamsburg, Douglaston Development, Levine Builders, Fisher Brothers, First Nationwide Title Agency, Flushing Bank, Foley & Lardner, Friedman, Handler Real Estate Organization, HAP Investments, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Center at Syracuse University, Kilroy Architectural Windows, New York's Window Company, Madison Realty Capital, Matone Group, Mercantile Commerce Bank, Meridian Capital Group, MHP Real Estate Services, New Banks, Optimum Window Manufacturing Corp., People's United Bank, Rosewood Realty Group, SJP Properties, Sterling National Bank, Sterling Risk, Stonehenge Partners, TD Bank, Terra CRG, The Continuum Company, The Moynihan Group, and These Friends.
Everyone wants to be in the Bronx. You want to go to Yankee Stadium. You want to go to the new Marriott. You want to go shopping. People are running to the Bronx because it's a great opportunity. So today I've assembled this group of business leaders who are going to tell us of what's happening in the Bronx. My guests today include probably the leading investment sales broker advisor in the borough of the Bronx, Shimon Shkury, who is the president, CEO, founder of Ariel Property Advisors. Joe Kelleher, who is the president of Simone Metro Properties, also chairman of the Bronx Chamber of Commerce and chairman of the Boy Scouts of the Bronx. Samantha Magistro, who is a managing director of Bronx Pro Realty Group. And last but not least, the newest person to go to the Bronx, who was originally born in the Bronx, my friend Alan Suna, who is the CEO of Silvercup Studios and a principal at Silvercup Properties. So you've been getting all this press all of a sudden about the Long Island City, the premier studio company in New York, which I only consider that, not leaving Long Island City, expanding to the Bronx. So why do you go to the Bronx and buy the property from this guy over here?
It was a great piece of property. We saw it a number of years ago. It worked well for our needs in terms of retrofitting an existing property. And so when it became available, we bought it.
So what are you building?
We're building 4 new TV studios, TV and film studios, plus offices, support space, carpentry shops, all the kinds of stuff that we normally do.
How many companies are buying properties like Allen today?
Well, actually, there are several businesses that are going into the Bronx, especially in the South Bronx. I mean, take Fresh Direct as an example. They're going to finish their build-out in 2016. That's about a $100 million project. There are some investors that are going there, like Somerset and Shkury, to develop in the South Bronx. There's a lot of new things happening. You came from Queens. I mean, there's some other businesses that are coming from Wilkes Point, to the Bronx.
Are we seeing institutional investors coming to the Bronx today?
Mostly for development. Less so for the multifamily asset class, mostly for development.
Samantha, your company has been operating in the Bronx for, 25 years? Mm-hmm. So what do you I would call are the affordable housing people in the Bronx, and you do it based on the area median income in most of the properties, where
Correct.
I noticed one of your properties recently was like 80%. Explain to my audience the opportunities for people who can live in the Bronx on these affordable housing.
Yeah, so the whole idea with affordable housing is that we use government subsidies so that our rents can be lower than what they would need to be to actually build it. And so we create housing that is for families who are low income, which are at 60% of AMI, which for a typical family of four would be about $45,000. And so and for moderate income families, that's families earning 80% of AMI, which you mentioned before. About $63,000.
So, and what is that family going to pay in rent for an apartment?
Yeah, for a 2-bedroom, you're talking about $1,200 typically.
Which is a great opportunity. And that's available, I think it has to be a family of 4.
Correct. Okay. Well, it depends on the size of the apartment. So if you're talking about a studio, that would be a family of 1 or potentially 2. Or we have 3 bedrooms, which could be up to 5 to 6 individuals in the apartment.
So let's talk about you. You're like the big kahuna of the Bronx. I mean, you guys have built. You've gone into the Bronx. There hadn't been development in the Bronx for years. I mean, it was the Grand Concourse, would probably be the last development right near Yankee Stadium of that office building, and then maybe something on Fordham Road. Talk to me about your developments over there in the Bronx.
Michael, in 2001, when Joe Simone, who was born and raised in the Bronx, had a passion for developing in the Bronx, and he knew that the commercial office space was under office, as he would say, and we purchased 18 acres with an existing building that was there, which was part of the Bronx Psychiatric Center, and we converted that to a Class A office building. Most people thought that Joe was not on target with this.
They felt the psychiatric center was a possibility.
They sure did. But Joe really believed in the vision. He's a visionary. And right out of the box, Visiting Nurse Services of New York consolidated many of their offices to the space. And Mercy College opened a 125,000 square foot Bronx campus there, which today, many years later, is doing phenomenal.
Now, you've also recently opened up the Marriott. I mean, there was always this perception of the Bronx. Unfortunately, some of the banks that I've advised, who are out of the state, they say, the Bronx, the Bronx is, bonfires of the vanity. They were the poor perception. And about 2 years ago, they opened up this small little hotel called the Opera House Hotel on 149th Street. But now you've opened up a Marriott, okay? And I mean, Montefiore, who's the largest employer in the Bronx and probably one of the most preeminent medical institutions in the nation, especially now with their affiliation, taking over of the Einstein College of Medicine, they're out there. So talk about those things.
Well, let's touch on healthcare for a second. Healthcare is changing, and the dynamics of how healthcare is being given to people today has changed tremendously. And we just had the fortunate experience to build an outpatient ambulatory surgery center, which is better known as a bedless hospital, for Montefiore. So any procedure that you would normally have done in a hospital, you could have done in this facility and go home that day. Seems that the hospitals don't want the patients to have to come to the hospitals for services. It's much cheaper and more efficient for them to do this on an outpatient basis.
Right. I've had the head of Montefiore on my show. I've done a couple of healthcare shows. Under the ACA approach, they get paid higher reimbursement when they get people out of the hospital faster than they would keep them in there. So that's a situation.
That is true.
So this is one studio, but you're also in the real estate business, Mm-hmm. Would you look over there in acquiring other property, because as Shimon was saying before, Somerset and Shatreat are planning to build like on the water, right? On
Correct.
149th Street.
In an area that was just rezoned.
Right, exactly.
They just had a new rezoning. The area that we just moved into is still commercially zoned. But under this administration, they're looking at a variety of areas that are commercial or industrial zones to convert it into residential zones in order to achieve the mayor's goal of affordable housing. I have a suggestion, to this administration, which I've been pretty plain about, is that if, we can't lose all of this commercial and industrial space, even if the economy changes somewhat. So if they're going to give additional FAR, which is the ability to build more housing and have a portion of it be for affordable housing, they should give additional FAR for those developers that can go in and replace in a sense, the space that they're taking away.
The show that we did a week before, we spoke about Brooklyn and Queens, but Seth Pinsky, who used to be the head of the economic development, said, it's wonderful that we're building this affordable housing, but we can't lose the jobs from the creation of the businesses. Joe was saying before that they had Old Town who made Melba toast on their facility. We're losing a lot of these businesses. Silvercup Studios was Silvercup Bakery before you guys bought it. So we're losing that business. It's nice that Fresh Direct is moving over here, but Fresh Direct is a distribution company. It's not a manufacturing company. And we people love this made in New York idea. And if we lose that, that's going to be a situation.
Well, yeah, we always have to realize that the economy is changing. And, I think Melba toast is a staple, for example, on people's dinner table, is not where it was 50 years ago when I was growing up. I know I'm only 40, but you know what I'm saying. And but there are new kinds of jobs that are coming in. In fact, in the South Bronx, there's a number of culinary businesses that are actually moving their operations to the South Bronx. So it's creating new jobs in previously warehousey kinds of underutilized spaces. So there's more opportunity for more jobs, and we just have to be able to integrate housing and the jobs and not have people, just the last thing, have them go on mass transit or drive around in cars. Let them walk to work. And that's the greatest thing that we could do here in New York.
One of the benefits of the Bronx, and I'd say many of your tenants over there, transportation is really good in the Bronx in most places. You can get into the city in a short period of time. That's the key. Except like we brought up City Islands a little further.
I'm going to interrupt you. Get into the what?
Into Manhattan.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, but not to get too long in the city. Okay.
This is the Bronx now. It's the same issue.
Okay, but the idea is transportation is I don't want to bring it up, but I will. People are complaining. Uber and Lyft and other car services pick up people in the Bronx and other neighborhoods. Regular yellow taxi cabs weren't there. That's why the green cabs were created, so the car services that can come into the city. That's part of what you need. Now, you were bringing up before, which was interesting, that a lot of people, you recently opened up the hotel, and people who might have come to Manhattan to stay at a Marriott are thinking of going to the Bronx right now for the Marriott.
We're finding a lot of leisure travel. It's amazing. And people who are coming and staying at the hotel with their families are opting to walk the mile to the number 6 Lexington Avenue train and take that ride into the city so they get out at Grand Central. And what an experience for a family that hasn't been to New York, wants to stay in Manhattan, maybe can't afford that Manhattan price, but yet at the Marriott in the Bronx, it's more affordable. So it really works well for them.
What about retail in the Bronx for sale purposes? We were talking briefly, one of the most main shopping areas in the Bronx over years has been Fordham Road. What's happening in Fordham Road?
Look, it's still a great location. As you said, before, there's a few institutions that are buying there. It's being helped by the university as well. I think that one area also that's not Fordham Road, but we should consider about retail and resi is Mott Haven. And Mott Haven today...
Where is Mott Haven for my viewers? So
it's the southern part of the Bronx, the closest to Manhattan. And it has the most accessibility to Manhattan. It's one train station from 125th Street.
So is that where Somerset and Shattrita building?
That's part of that location.
Now, do you have any property, any buildings in the Mott Haven neighborhood?
Not that far south, no.
It's probably harder for you to develop there.
Yeah, we've looked at a number of sites, and always, even at the downturn of the market, what we were offering, they felt like, hey, we're going to hold on to this and see what the future will be.
Right. I mean, if you need to build at, $20, $30, $40 a buildable there, the prices are closer to 70 or 80. It's harder to find, locations.
It's amazing with retail that I was just amazed when I heard the Bronx Borough president talking about this, that the J.C. Penney's that's in Bay Plaza near Co-op City is evidently the third revenue-producing store in the entire country. So it's no wonder that Macy's just opened a new Macy's there. Together, they have 1.2 million square feet of retail space. It's the largest indoor mall in the city of New York.
But when you look at the Bronx, I mean, what happened, I mean, with Simone and what happened with Related? I mean, Related's property right near Yankee Stadium is huge, you know, and the Stella D'Oro location where you have the BJ's and other developments over there. I mean, this is, you know, there's a lot of people shopping in the Bronx, okay? You know, there's no more Lomans, but, you know, it's been replaced by, you know, by other retailers over there. There's a gentrification. What are the rents, the residential rents, you know, for the market rate as opposed to the affordable that Samantha was talking about?
So there's not enough market rate to talk about, but what there is in the existing multifamily building, it's in the 30s at the highest end. Projections for new construction in areas like the South Bronx are in the 40s per foot, and most of average prices per foot for residential rents are in the mid-20s. And I think you're probably looking at lower than 20 or around $20 a foot.
Now, what about with regard to the office tendencies in your property? Because you're going to be building a second property.
Well, we think the market is there. You know, at this point, at 1.4 million square feet, I don't have any occupancy. You know, there are no vacancies, which is phenomenal. The new 33 acres that we're acquiring from the state will consist of approximately 1.9 million square feet of Class A office space when it's done. But the intent there is to bring in another hotel, because we feel the market will bear it, other educational facilities to focus on healthcare, education. And then there's biotech, there's incubators, there's a lot of high-tech needs out there. And I think that in the position that we are at the Hutchinson Metro Center, we're poised to attract those type of businesses. And we're very excited about the prospects of that.
What about, you know, what's happened, you know, in your home of Long Island City with the Fauci building, and in Brooklyn, you know, with Industry City, and in Manhattan with the Chelsea markets? Are we seeing, and you know, you have your feet down in the Bronx? Are we seeing the food production in the Bronx? Are we seeing the, you know, one of my buddies told me to meet these guys from the Bronx Brewery, these two very dynamic guys who it's like an event space, and you know they're interesting things. Are we seeing that? I mean, everybody knows about Arthur Avenue. You know, people want to go to Arthur Avenue. You know, it's like going to Rayo's and situation. What are we seeing? Are we seeing a lot of visitors coming to the Bronx today?
I mean, I can, from our perspective in the neighborhoods that we work in, I mean, I think it's very working class, and you don't have that kind of cachet of, you know, Arthur Avenue or Bronx Brewery. But you know, and you see like more typical, you know, retail uses and food uses for that community.
But in the South Bronx, Mike, you are getting people that not necessarily restaurants, but are actually producers of food that are moving into the South Bronx into, you know, more affordable spaces, and it's helping the whole area to change dramatically.
I did a show a couple weeks ago called the Difficulties in Food Production in New York City, and I had a company called Or Washes Bread. And Or Washes...
Had Abram on the show?
Keith Cohn. And what happened was Or Washes was a small bakery on 78th Street off 2nd Avenue, and he needed to expand. And where did he expand? He expanded in the Bronx Market, the Terminal Market, and he has, that's where his facility is. And, you know, the trucks, you know, he has the capability of having parking, so he can have his trucks go into the city. You know,
into where?
Into Manhattan, to Brooklyn, Queens, the other boroughs. But that's the benefit of the certain parts of the Bronx. You know, it's the same situation in Long Island City.
Yeah, but actually, you know, where we are in the South Bronx, it's similar, not the same, but as we have in Long Island City, which is access to major roads and access to mass transit. It's a 10-minute walk to the 6th train, but we've got, you know, the Route 87, the Major Diggin, you've got the Bruckner, and people can get to, for the film and television business, they can get to locations in northern Manhattan, and they can get to locations in the North Bronx and into Westchester County, which before they could blow their brains out waiting to get up there.
Will there be a differential? We were talking, Shimon brought out, with differential in rents and differential, in affordable market. Will there be a differential in the pricing of the use of a studio in Long Island City as opposed to the Bronx?
No, first of all, the products are very different. The studios we have in Long Island City are different than the one we're doing in the Bronx. The one in the Bronx is much wider, taller. It's grander in a lot of ways, and the location doesn't have as much to do with pricing for our business. It may have to do with pricing for other kinds of businesses. But for example, trying to find commercial space in Long Island City now
is impossible.
It's crazy. You're paying $200, $300, $400, an FAR foot in certain cases, because you have developer or owners that think, everything's going to get converted into residential, which it's not. In the Bronx, you can buy stuff for $100. The property.
Shimon just said $70 a foot.
Well, the property that we just bought from Joe over here, I did some quick math. We paid about $167 a square foot. Okay.
Can't find that anywhere in the city.
In Manhattan?
No. He said the city. He meant all
the city.
I didn't want to get hit. Before
with 50-foot ceilings.
Yeah.
Think about the heights. He can do the next Spider-Man there.
So who are the tenants in your retail and in your community facility spaces?
That's a really good question. I also just thinking about the Bronx. It's a big borough, and the South Bronx has a lot of heat. But I think that there are a lot of working class neighborhoods that have a little bit of a different dynamic going on.
One of the people fail to say Riverdale is one of the finest neighborhoods in
Riverdale,
the Bronx.
City Island,
okay, City
Bronx
Island.
Neck.
You have that.
Very different.
You go over there. It's beautiful. And parts of Riverdale are very convenient. Parts of Riverdale are a little further away from mass transit.
Yeah, but to answer your question, we're really looking at your, kind of bodega supermarket. Like a traveling agency, community facilities. We have art centers, we have senior centers, we have daycares is a big one. So those type of uses that meet the daily needs, but also could use upgrades with time and as I would say more working class folks come into these communities, low income housing. If you're talking in the moderate to middle income, they're looking for, maybe the cafe and maybe the different clothing opportunities.
Which is what happened in Washington Heights. Right. The Heights has now had more cafes opening up, like near Inwood and so on. So there's been a gentrification on that in the cafes over there.
Absolutely. You mentioned tourism earlier, and I was meeting with the head of the Wildlife Conservation Society who run the Bronx Zoo. They have over 3 million visitors a year between Botanical Gardens and the Bronx Zoo, which is another market for our hotel. We see people coming just to go to Arthur Avenue for dinner, to go to a Yankee game, to visit all these cultural sites that we have in the Bronx. So the Bronx
What's the
has a lot to
majority,
offer.
If you had to break down your Chamber of Commerce, the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, and I think you're in the Long Island City
partnership.
What type of, who are the most active players in the community?
In terms of businesses?
Yeah.
Well, we have about 350 businesses, and there's everything from manufacturers to printers to your small retail operators, all types of businesses, the larger utility companies with Verizon and Con Edison. Everybody's involved. What I love about the Chamber of Commerce is that it's such a potpourri of businesses that come together, and just from the dynamics of that, they wind up just self-referring and doing business together, and it's really a dynamic environment to be in, and it's been very successful.
Are you a member of the Chamber of Commerce?
I believe I am.
Yes, I think you are.
No, but I know you've spoken for the Bronx.
Bronx, I'm on the board of Bronx Manhattan North.
But you've been very involved with the Bronx for many years since you started.
Since 2002. And I want to really just make a point of what Samantha said, because she's absolutely right. There's not just the South Bronx, and if you look at the asset classes that are trading in the Bronx, the majority is really multifamily, and that's throughout the Bronx and not just the South Bronx. But the South Bronx is benefiting mostly from most of the development in the Bronx today. So,
right, which is the proximity and
yes.
access to Manhattan. so to speak.
When you were looking, did you look at other sections in the Bronx?
We focused most of our attention in the South Bronx. Vacant land, other kinds of older warehouses. This one happens to have been a newer one. Because, again, we have to think about the logistics of the clients that use our facilities. They need to get around with big caravans.
When I was on the board of the College of Podiatry, which is on 125th Street, we didn't have housing. And where we would utilize housing because we were able to get affordable student housing was in the Parkchester neighborhood. We would rent from Parkchester apartments because it was affordable. And what's happening with Parkchester? I mean, it was when it was built, after the war. You still have Macy's there and others.
It's a dynamic. If you go to Parkchester and you visit the merchants community there, it's thriving. It's just amazing how well they're doing. All of these merchant corridors within the Bronx, including Parkchester, now have the business improvement districts in place. So there's a lot of improvements being made in these particular areas, and it's attracting more retail. It's supporting the existing shops.
And relating to Alan's decision to go over there, companies who are relocating, to the Bronx from other boroughs, are gaining the REAP benefits and other benefits, the city benefits over there in taxes. And you're going to get some ICP. You're going to get taxes.
Just what I call regulation tax abatements for improvements.
Right, but if you bring some new employees over there, you're going to be able to get the REAP benefits.
It depends on where you're located. Usually if you're below 96th Street in Manhattan and you come to the Bronx, the REAP.
I don't think we get REAP from Queens to the Bronx. But it's a nice thought. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that. So in essence, as opposed to people saying the Bronx is burning, the Bronx is booming. And I think definitely we're seeing as Shimon brought out, major developers building residential over there, Silvercup opening up a major studio over there, you building more affordable housing when it's available based on the land, and you just being the big kahula, as I said, with major developments, office buildings, hotels, and substantial retail. And I'd like to thank Shimon, Joe, Samantha, and Alan, and I'll see you next week.